Davis, let me just hit a few bio points and then we'll launch into it, okay? All right. So first of all, the Honorable Robert Abrams, Bob Abrams' 28-year career in public life was marked by achievement, independence, and integrity. 3 terms in the State Assembly of New York, 3 terms as the borough president in the Bronx, 4 terms as Attorney General of New York State, receiving numerous awards and recognitions and prominence, very rare for a state-level official. He was a president of the National Association of Attorneys General, and incidentally, in the context of that, he's taken delegations of attorneys general to Israel, and really done so much for the Jewish people in that respect. He joined the law firm of Strzok & Levin as a partner in 1994. NYU Law School established the Attorney General Robert Abrams Public Service Lecture, whereby each year a prominent public figure addresses the student body, urging students to go into a career in public service. If you read the book, please get the book so you can read all the great people that Bob Abrams has invited. Now, a really important event was in 2009, Governor Patterson issued an executive order renaming the Albany Justice Building as the Robert Abrams Building for Law and Justice. Actually, Effie, don't we have that picture? We're going to do that at the end. Can we put it in now? Can we just show that picture of Bob and his family standing in front of the building, which has been named in his honor? I hope we can find it. If we can't, we'll look at it later. Effie's behind the scenes, so he's looking for the photo. Yeah, I think you need to move it a little. Yeah, I think is there a way to move it over to center it better? So there you have Bob Abrams and his beautiful family.
Grandkids in there. You have to.
Yes, of course. The grandkids are there. It's not just the building. Remember, Bob reminds us it's all about the family.
Lift it up a little more, Effie.
While we're getting the photo, I wanted to say that Bob. Yes, that's right. Want to look at the name of the building. That's right. Can we see it? We saw it before. I don't know why. I think it's called the Robert Abrams. Let's see.
Don't worry about it.
Well, in any event, let me just say he's been a pioneer in working for Soviet Jewry, helping refuseniks, particularly Valery and Galina Panov and others. He helped Jews in the Soviet Union. He's been an international figure in the Soviet Jewry movement, initiated the Jewish Heritage Week in New York City school system, incorporating Holocaust curriculum, which is now spread throughout the United States. And he's a strong supporter of the state of Israel and has led the delegations of key officials to Israel. And there's so much more. Let's just jump into this right away. So I'd like to start with the photo of Bob's parents at their luncheonette in the Bronx. I mean, this is, and they used to call it the store, right, Bob? It was called the store.
My sister and I and the whole family, we called it the store. And this is a classic. I mean, this is one of my most treasured photographs. I've got photographs of all kinds, but my mom and dad in the store. My mother is making an egg cream. That's the famous drink of New York. And look at my dad's right hand. He's got a cigar in his hand. He smoked 10 or 12 cigars a day. And take a look at that sign in the background. A pastrami sandwich was 40 cents. You go to a kosher deli in New York, it's probably 20 bucks today. So this is a treasured picture for a lot of reasons. And I worked behind the counter. That's where it was as much a part of my education as going to Columbia College, you know, working with people, seeing all different kinds of people come across that threshold and, you know, respecting them, understanding them, working with them, and working at the side of my mom and dad.
I think what comes out in your book is the incredible support that your parents gave you in everything you wanted to do. When you came to them and said, I got into Columbia, but you know, it's so expensive, your parents' reaction was, you know, instantaneous. Yeah. You want to talk about that a little bit?
I owe them so much. First of all, they gave me the genes and they gave me good genes, you know, respect for others, hard work, honesty, and they taught me so much, you know, about loyalty. They put me on the ballot. I mean, I was an insurgent. I ran for public office. I never thought I'd run for public office. And I ran, went 2 years out of law school, 27-year-old kid. It was a David and Goliath race. I challenged my assemblyman, a 17-year incumbent, the chairman of the most powerful committee in the assembly, the Ways and Means Committee. And the organization wanted to knock me off the ballot, but my mother and father, every single night of the petition period, 6 or 8 weeks, every night they took petitions and they went out. And they went to parts of the district where there weren't elevated buildings. In Pelham Parkway, there was an elevator. So you started at the 6th floor and you worked your way down. You got up to the 6th floor by the elevator. But in Tremont, there were walk-up buildings, and they would walk up those stairs. And great stories. Mark, you were telling me before the program that you loved the line that my mother.
I'd like to read it, Bob, because it's so
Okay.
hilarious. And honest to God, I didn't expect that I'd be laughing through this. This book is very, very funny. So, and funny, but in a beautiful way, charming. So here is Dottie Abrams, Bob's mother, going and campaigning for him and going door to door. So she goes to the door, she knocks on the door and says, and knocks on the door, and the lady's in the house. She says, "Who is it?" "It's Dottie Abrams, your neighbor. My son is running for the assembly. I want you to support my son." "Lady," the woman said, as she opened the door and faced my mother, "I have enough trouble supporting my own son." Can you imagine? "Would you support my son?" "No, because what you want, I guess she thought you wanted to support you in some respect." I mean, this is fantastic. And I wanted to also mention, we have a picture of Grandma Ida. Can we look at that picture also, Effie? You have that one, because that's just absolutely lovely.
Yeah, I learned
Now,
so
Grandma
much.
Ida was an absolute there with you in your family all the time. She babysat you guys and took care of everybody. And she had this famous button, right, that you talk about, "Vote for Bob Abrams," right, for the assembly race.
That on her, that's a homemade button. No, vote for my grandson, Bob Abrams, for the assembly. Vote for Bob Abrams, my grandson, for borough president. I mean, when I became an assemblyman, I decided to send out newsletters, and my grandmother's apartment became a factory. All of the envelopes were sent from Albany to go to her house because she put all the labels on the newsletters. So she was my chief campaigner at the center of our community, Leidig Avenue and White Plains Road in Pelham Parkway in the Northeast Bronx. But beyond all that, it was her values. I mean, she came from Russia. She escaped the pogroms with her parents. And she didn't have a formal education, and she couldn't write. She would just scratch out, her name. But she was one of the smartest people I ever met in my life. Her wisdom, her humanity, her common sense, her judgment, her love, her loyalty. She had so little money, but she'd always slip me some dollar bills in my hand. I said, Grandma, I'm okay. I have enough. Don't worry. No. She was a fantastic person, in my life.
And you have a little bit of a Sisyphus story here, because the regulars tried to sabotage your campaigns. They would break the levers from the voting machines. They would put chewing gum over your name. Wow. How'd you react to that? It's just terribly difficult thing.
It wasn't easy. I never dreamt that I'd be in politics. My family wasn't active in politics. This was all an accident. I tell this to students when I talk to them, how you can't plan your life. Life is serendipitous. Things just happen. You never know how you're going to meet your mate. If you're a lawyer, you really don't know what you're going to practice, concentrate in. The first case they drop off at your desk, that may wind up to be your specialty for the rest of your life. So you don't know what's going to happen. And I never dreamt that I'd be in politics. And it's an interesting story if you want me to tell it, Mark.
Yes, I think the story involves your getting an assignment at Columbia to find out about your congressman. So what happened?
Yeah, so I took this course, Government 3132, with Professor David Truman. He was a wonderful guy, very prominent. He later became the dean of the college. And he told all of us, at that time, Columbia was still all male before it became co-ed. And he said, look, I'm going to give you an assignment. You got to write a paper on your congressional district. I want to know everything about that district. You've got to tell me what the parameters, the borders of the district are. You have to tell me who lives in that district. What's the socioeconomic makeup of the district? I want to know everything. The politics of the district, the history of that district. And I want one more thing. I want you to interview your member of Congress, your congressman. So after we got that assignment, I started to do the research, and there came a time when I felt that I better start trying to get to see my congressman. So I figured, let me go to the phone book and find out the address of the district office, his district office in the neighborhood. And lo and behold, I found out there was no district office. All right, so he was a powerful guy. He was a 30-year veteran of the Congress. His name was Charlie Buckley. He was the chairman of the Public Works Committee, and he was the boss of the Bronx. He was the Democratic leader of the Bronx. And so he didn't have an office in the district, so I figured I'll call his office in Washington. So I called once, I called twice, I called 3 times, I left messages. I'm a constituent of Congressman Buckley. I'm a student at Columbia College. I have to have an interview with him for my paper. Nothing. No one returned my call. And one day I was helping my dad in the store, and he says, Bobby, how are things going? And I said, oh, okay, things are good. And I started to tell him about this course in the paper. And I said, you know, I'm having a problem though, Daddy. I'm supposed to interview the congressman and I can't get to see him. And he said, I got an idea. Sophie Cartman. He said, you know Sophie, she comes in the store. I said, oh, yeah. She has light coffee and a toasted bagel. I remember Sophie. And then he says, yeah, but the important thing is she's a captain in the Democratic Club. She'll help us. So he asked Sophie. Sophie comes in. He tells her the story. He says, Benny, for you, for Bobby, of course. Be my pleasure. And so some time goes by. He didn't want to bug her. A week, 10 days go by. And he says, Sophie, so how is it going with Congressman Buckley? She said, I'm working on it. I'm working on it. A little more time went by, and he checked with her again. What's going on? And she sheepishly and embarrassingly said, Benny, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do it. I'm having some difficulty. And by the time it came to turn in the paper, I turned in the paper without the interview with my congressman. And I got a decent grade, but I thought my grade suffered a little bit because maybe Professor Truman felt I didn't work hard enough to get the interview. So I graduate Columbia College. I'm at NYU Law School, and there's a reception sponsored by Francis W.H. Adams. He was the former police commissioner, and he brought all the NYU law students together, and he said, look, you're all going to become lawyers, but it's not enough for you to be just a lawyer. You should be active in the community. You should get involved in politics, get involved in politics. And I'm involved in the reform movement. With Herbert Lehman and Eleanor Roosevelt, we're trying to open up the Democratic Party, get rid of the abuses. And so we want you to get involved. So, you know, it was very interesting. I was inspired. I went back. A couple of weeks later, I get a phone call from somebody from the Bronx Pelham Reform Democratic Club, 708 Lydic Avenue, one flight up from the Chinese restaurant on Lydic Avenue. And she says, you know, Mr. Abrams, Bob, you went to the reception, and we want to recruit you. We're involved in a campaign. And I said, look, I'd love to do it. Maybe I'll do it someday. I like what I heard, but I'm very busy. I'm still a student, and I'm helping out. I got different jobs. I help my dad in the store. I really can't do it. She said, oh, no, but they're great races and they're important. I said, well, look, as I told you, you know, maybe one day, but this is not the right moment. And she said, no, we're running not only for party office, but we're challenging some incumbent elected officials. We're running a race against Congressman Buckley. I said, what did you say? She said, we're running against Congressman Buckley. I said, that son of a bitch, you've got me. And that's how I got involved in politics. I volunteered to work in the campaign against Buckley, that guy who wouldn't give me an appointment. And that was it. That launched my whole interest in involvement in politics.
Well, we're lucky he didn't give you an appointment, because otherwise you wouldn't have done it. But it's very funny things here again, very hilarious. You ordered thousands of fortune cookies, which said your good fortune would be Bob Abrams as borough president. But apparently you had a situation where the mice ate about 10,000 of the fortune cookies. The other one, just related, is hilarious. Your friend Tony had his brother, and the brother didn't have anything to do, so he came and helped you make signs. The other thing he did is he sabotaged the signs of your opponents. But there's a very good one here where there's this guy Kappelman for borough president. So what did he do, Bob? What did he do to the Kappelman for borough president, your opponent?
Well, when I served in the assembly, And a very nice guy from the district next door, Tony Stella. He was a
Yes.
reform candidate. We drove to Albany together. There were 5 reform and independent members of the assembly from the Bronx. And we got to be very close. And here I was running for borough president. So Tony comes to visit me. He says, Bob, yeah, I'm your friend. I'm going to help you. I got a brother, Johnny, and he's a very unusual guy. He's going to help you. And Johnny comes to see me and he says, I'm going to help you put up signs all over the Bronx. And in the headquarters, he ordered cork and he ordered printed, and it said Abrams Borough Pres, 3 by 3, 3 feet by 3 feet. And he got this paste and glue. You know, you see guys putting up these signs in the subways, so that's the way he was pasting these signs. And he would put them up all over Abrams Borough Pres. And but the regulars would tear them down. And he got very, very upset and angry. Johnny would do it through the night. He made like 1,000 of these signs, and then he would go out from 12 o'clock to 5 o'clock putting up all these signs, and then the regulars would tear them down. So the regulars finally put up their signs, and I was running against a very able guy. He was called the silver-tongued orator of the assembly delegation from the Bronx. His name was William Kappelman, Billy Kappelman. He was an assemblyman, and then he was a judge, and he stepped down from the bench to run for borough president. And just as I was never supposed to win in the assembly, I was not supposed to win this race for borough president because all the odds were stacked against me. I didn't have the money. I didn't have the support. I didn't have the organization. And he was putting up these fancier signs. They were mounted on canvas, and they were hand painted, and it said, Kappelman for borough president. So Johnny got so upset that everybody tore down his signs. So instead of tearing down their signs, he just took out a couple of letters from the Kappelman sign, and they would read Ape Man for borough pres.
Brilliant. It's brilliant. See, without that, you
I had
wouldn't
nothing
be
to
who
do
you
with
are
that.
today.
This was all Johnny's idea.
Exactly. You would take no responsibility. Effie, put the picture up of Bob when he was a waiter at the Zygers Hotel. That's a great cute. I don't know if you have that one. That's a good one.
Well, as you said, tuition was expensive. I mean, it's nothing like today. Today it's $50,000, $60,000. It was $750 in my day, and then it went up to $1,000 while I was there. So I had to work to get that $1,000, and I did it by working in the Catskills. And here's a picture of me as a waiter. How about that? I'm holding up a tray of goblets. Pretty dexterous, huh? And next to me is the busboy. You know, it was very hard work. I worked in Singers in Spring Valley. I worked at Zygers Hotel in Fallsburg, in the Catskills. I worked at the Grand Lake Lodge, the finest kosher hotel in Connecticut, in Lebanon, Connecticut. You worked 7 days a week, no days off, 3 meals a day. At Zygers, I'd work the nightclub on Saturday night after having worked the whole day. And after the nightclub, I worked the canteen where people would sober up in the coffee shop. And so, you know, I was a very hard worker, and I wanted to earn as much money, as many tips as I could, so I could pay for tuition. And on the Columbia campus, I was working as well. I worked John Jay Hall 2 hours a day to get my 3 meals free. I delivered the Columbia Daily Spectator. I had a lot of different odd jobs in order to make sure that you know, the tuition and the books could get paid.
Extraordinary. Extraordinary. I mean, you know, people get the book and you can read about all the things that Bob did as a waiter to survive. That's great stuff, honest to God, you know, because the boss of the hotel didn't like to give out a lot of bread. So you had to collect them 2 slices at a time so that you could actually give the customers bread. And, you know, I mean, it's great stuff. You know, your memory for detail on this is great. But anyway, let me move right on to one of the great stories. There's so many nice stories in the book. It's the day that Bob Abrams met Moses. Yes, that's right. Bob Abrams went, he didn't ascend, he descended to meet Moses. Well, tell us, what was this about? It's such a funny section of the book. What happened and what was the whole issue there?
Well, this was Robert Moses, of course.
That's right.
And the Robert Moses. He's one of the most unique people in the history of New York. And certainly at that time, he was the most unique person in the governance of New York. I mean, he was a master builder. He had multiple titles at one and the same time. He was the City Parks Commissioner, the State Parks Commissioner, the Power Commissioner. He built the Triborough Bridge. He built the Verrazano Bridge, the Whitestone Bridge, the Throgs Neck Bridge. He built Jones Beach. He was the president of the World's Fair. He did a lot of stuff that he was criticized for. He built the Cross Bronx Expressway before my time as borough president, ripping apart neighborhoods. He was a very authoritarian and powerful guy. And one day I get a phone call. The borough president of Bronx, and he says, it's Robert Moses. He says, Mr. President, Mr. Borough President, let's have lunch. So I said, okay, sure. What are we going to talk about? You just come down here and we'll talk about it. I said, well, where are we going to do it? He said, in my place, of course. My place. And at that point, he was just a consultant. He used to be the head of the Triborough Bridge and Tunnel Authority. Now he's just a consultant. So my public information officer and I, we go down to have lunch, and he had a palace. Nobody even knew that it existed. It's on Randall's Island. When you go to the Triborough Bridge, there's a little turn to the right and you go down a ramp, and there is this enormous building, and you walk in and there are all the models of all the projects that he was involved in. And he comes and greets me and he puts his arm around me, and pretty quickly he's telling me what the subject is. He said, "Now, Mr. Borough President, you don't mind if we move the Hall of Fame out of the Bronx, do you?" I said, "What did you say? Mr. Moses, what was that?" He said, "The Hall of Fame. You know, that Hall of Fame, we're going to move it out of the Bronx. You don't care, do you?" I said, "Well, what do you mean, move it out? Of course I care. That's one of the treasured landmarks of the borough." This was a Stanford White facility on the uptown campus of NYU at the Heights, built on a bluff overlooking the Harlem River. And it had busts of great Americans. Every 5 years, a committee designated who was going to be entering the Hall of Fame, and these very prominent men and women. And it was synonymous with the Bronx. It was part of the treasures of the Bronx. And I said, "Why are you going to do that? Where is it going to go?" He said, "We're going to move it to the Metropolitan Museum of Art for the bicentennial." I said, "Mr. Moses, I'm not going to let you do that. I can't let you do that. Oh, my dead body. Why am I going? What do you mean?" And then at that time, we got called into lunch by his secretary, but he kept working me over and telling me how, you can't be like what happened in France. They wanted to build a Pantheon to help remember all the great martyrs and people who served the people of France. And of course, there's only one place to build it, Paris. But the pipsqueak mayors of Marseille and Lyon, they were trying to say that the Pantheon should be built there. Now, you don't want to have, no one goes up there to that Hall of Fame. No one goes there. It's too cold. I said, "Well, let's talk about that, Mr. Moses. You're a doer. Let's enclose the Hall of Fame. Let's make it more prominent. Let's have people know that it's there. Let's increase the attendance. Let's do things to improve it, but don't steal it from my borough." So there aren't many people who stood up to Robert Moses and said,
Well,
no.
the other part was when you were having the discussion with him, his acolytes, his flunkies, his people came in, and it was very, very cold. And then one of the guys said to Robert Moses that maybe Mr. Abrams is an Eskimo. And I don't think you were ever called an Eskimo before. It sounds like it was a surreal experience for you. But the part that I take from it, which is very important, is that Robert Moses sent you a copy of his book, and he inscribed it to the BP of the B with kindest regards, R. Moses. Robert Moses was not a humble guy. He was an arrogant guy. And that's a big, I think, honor for you. And I think throughout the book, it shows how you were able to win people over. And I think a good example of that is Father Gigante. You want to tell the story of when Father Gigante had a protest, going on outside your office, and then you engaged with him and you made him into a friend and a supporter. That's That's a wonderful story. Maybe you want to talk about that and this idea of how you are able to do that.
Well, the occasion was I was being sworn in as borough president of the Bronx. And I chose to do it at my alma mater, Christopher Columbus High School. I thought it would be a great tribute to the school. The kids would like it. The administration would like it. It would have some symbolism. It was in my old neighborhood in Pelham Parkway. So we're getting ready for the ceremony to begin. And somebody comes up to me and says, whispers in my ear, said, Bob, we've got some demonstrators out front. It's Father Gigante and a bunch of people carrying placards. I said, oh my God, that's terrible. Let me get out there. So I left the podium, I left the stage, and I ran out to the front. And I knew Father Gigante because I had run in a primary, a very active primary against Billy Kappelman, and I won. And I ran in the general election, and that was, there's no claim to fame by winning as a Democrat in the Bronx. We have in the Bronx what's called Pavlovian Democrats, like Pavlov's dog. The voters start at the top and they go all the way down voting for the Democrats. It's a very, very loyal group of people to the Democratic Party. So, but I did campaign, notwithstanding the fact that the Democratic candidate was going to win. And in the course of that campaign, I reunited with Father Gigante. He was from St. Athanasius Parish in the South Bronx, and he was a real fighter for the people. He's a very charismatic guy. He played basketball at Georgetown. He was a parish priest. He later ran for the city council, and he ran for Congress. He became a councilman. But on this occasion, he hadn't been in the council yet. He was just this activist priest. And I went out there and I said, Father Gigante, what's going on? He says, well, we need things in the South Bronx. We need an advocate for the South Bronx. And I said, Father, look, you and I know each other. We've talked in the campaign. You know my feelings. I'm going to be the borough president for all the people of the Bronx. I know the South Bronx is a deprived part of the Bronx, and I'm going to be a ferocious advocate for the needs of the Bronx. I want to build a Lincoln Hospital. I want to do things for the people of the Bronx, and you have my pledge. He was talking about housing, the desperate need to improve housing. And I said, I'm going to fight along with you at your side to try to bring as many resources to the deprived and denied part of the Bronx, the South Bronx. And he was satisfied by that, and he actually came in and sat down and watched the inauguration, and that began a relationship, you know. And as you said, Mark, I mean, the Bronx was a very diverse borough, a Jewish population, German population, Irish population, Italian population, the largest Puerto Rican population in the city. It was a huge place. People don't know New York City. They can't believe that the Bronx, you know, had 1.5 million people, larger than most states in the Union, larger than every city but 4 at that point in time, bigger than countries that have membership in the United Nations. So the Bronx was very large and very diverse, and it was a big challenge for me. I was the first Jewish borough president of the Bronx to go out there and try to earnestly fight for all the neighborhoods, all the community boards, all the districts, and try to be even-handed and try to convince people that I was sincere, I was honest. I saw politics as a calling. You know, a lot of people, and rightfully so, perhaps, have a nasty and lousy impression about politicians. Some of them betray the public trust. They can't be trusted. They're out for their own pocketbook or their own cronies. But I saw politics as a calling. A doctor, his profession is a calling. A librarian sees his or her job as a calling. A teacher sees it as a calling. A clergyman is a calling. Why shouldn't somebody who's in public service in public life view his obligation as a calling? You know, the Jewish community, tikkun olam, what an opportunity to be able to be on the front line and try to repair the world and do good. So that was my view, and that's where I was coming from. You know, I try to convey that to whoever I met, whether it was an elected official, an ordinary constituent, you know, anybody who I came in contact, I try to, you know, convey that I was coming from the right place.
Well, I think your life personifies public service, and I don't think the people really know all the things you've done. Like, for example, the bill you passed to make sure that you don't run into a glass pane in the glass door where people were getting injured, And the way you did it, the way you won that one was brilliant because you kind of used, cui bono, who benefits? And hey, the insurance companies. You want to talk about that one? It's a great story because nobody could get this done, but you got it done. And the way you did it was to show that there was something valuable to the special interests. I think it's very, very clever.
Well, I was a freshman legislator. I got elected to the assembly. I won that primary. I won the general election. I go up. I'm 27 years old. I'm the youngest member of the legislature at the time. And I introduced a bunch of bills. And one of the bills was, I read a story in a magazine that thousands of people every year in New York get injured, severely injured. They walk into glass panels, glass doors, because they're unmarked. They didn't realize that it was glass, and they get tremendously disfigured, seriously injured. So there was a lot of human loss as a result of it, a lot of anguish, a lot of pain. And so I introduced a bill saying that any owner of property that had a glass panel, a glass door would be obligated to have a marking on that door reasonably calculated to warn. It wasn't onerous. It didn't dictate how it had to be marked. Any kind of a marking, decal, name, sign, address, anything that would reasonably warn somebody that this is a glass door. And so I got it passed in the assembly, and it got stalemated in the Senate. And the Senate was controlled by the Republicans. And so I was desperate to try to get a bill passed in my first year as a legislator. And I really believed that this was a noble, it wasn't the most important piece of legislation introduced that year. I wasn't going to get my face chiseled in the mountains of South Dakota as a result of it. But I felt it was an important and a salutary piece of legislation. So I go to the Majority Leader, Warren Anderson, and I say, Senator Anderson, I'm a new member of the legislature, and Bob Abrams of the Bronx, and I introduced this bill, and I told him about the bill, and I said it got reported out of the Senate committee, but it's starred, and I need you to take off the star. And I figured I have to reach him in his own mind. I didn't think that the merits were enough, that people were going to be protected. And I knew that the Republicans were very tight with insurance companies and banks. And I said, this bill, Senator Anderson, has the support of insurance companies, the insurance industry. They feel very strongly about this. He said, really? How do I know that? I said, well, I have a file. I have letters from all kinds of insurance companies supporting it, because of course if this bill was passed, there'd be less accidents and they wouldn't have to make payments and payouts. So he said, look, let me see that, because I said something funny. I don't know how he took it, but I actually said this. I said, Senator Anderson, look, do me a favor. If you can pass this bill, it would be great. The insurance companies are for it. The public interest is good. And it's no threat to the Republican Party because I don't really have a Republican opponent. So help a nice Jewish boy from the Bronx out and remove the star and let me pass this bill. So he says, go get me the letters. I got him the letters from the insurance company. The star was removed. The bill was passed. It's been the law for years. And I think it's saved a lot of people some serious injury.
In terms of just quickly on the assembly today and the Senate and the state government, what's your take on the state government, federal government, the city, the state, the government, the world today? What's Bob Abrams' view of where we are in our polity and our politics today? We don't have you in a position of leadership. How are we doing? Is our ship sailing in a good way, or we need help? Because I want to mention, because we have to read the book on Amazon, get the book. All the things that Bob Abrams did. I mean, he was involved in Love Canal, the PIM thermometer company. Gee whiz, then nobody who knows about this, to save people, workers who had to actually be exposed to mercury poisoning. I mean, what a great chesed that he did. Antitrust reform, reproductive rights, marriage equality, you name it. Bob Abrams has been there. The Museum of the American Indian, Yankee Stadium, any things that you see there, Bob has had his imprimatur. But how you think we're doing? I mean, what's the state of the city, the state, the world in your view today? because it seems very, very difficult when
That's
people.
for sure. That's for sure. It's obvious we're not doing too well. Obviously, on beyond the pandemic, certainly here in the city, in the state, across the country, we're not doing well. I mean, I was proud when I was Attorney General and the president of the National Association of Attorneys General. I worked together with my colleagues. I didn't care whether an Attorney General was a Republican. It didn't matter whether the Attorney General was from a small state versus a large state. We were brothers and sisters together in the cause of trying to enforce laws to protect our constituents, to protect the people. It didn't matter whether somebody was a liberal or a conservative. We sought to rally around that upon which we could agree. And unfortunately, you don't see that today. You see a politics that is nihilistic, that is devastating. The attacks are there. There's gridlock. No one is willing to step forward and show some leadership, signs of good faith to come and work together, collaborate. I think the president is trying to do that, to try to have bipartisan support for an infrastructure proposal, but we see how difficult that is, even for a non-controversial subject like infrastructure, to have sound bridges and tunnels and highways. So it's we're not in a good place today, and certainly in New York City, and cities across the country, we're seeing the return of violent crime, murder. Our cities and streets are becoming unsafe again. So we need strong leadership. We need people in positions of power who are going to be able to get things done. Stop the finger pointing and playing the blame game. Let's try to get some things done. Move forward. I mean, this is a great country. This is a fantastic city and state. It's the greatest city in the world, and we're not in a good place. So this leads me to a message, because some of our viewers, they may be young people, or they may have children or grandchildren who are at the threshold of their lives. And I hope they're telling them, not discouraging them from going into government or politics, because it's easy to drop out. It's easy to find the problems. It's easy to be cynical. It's easy to say, ooh, or as my grandma Kaplan used to say, feck. No. They got to roll up their sleeves. They got to bring their idealism and their enthusiasm and their energy and intelligence to the fore. They got to bring them to the table so that we can help solve problems. And we need an infusion of that kind of person in political campaigns, in government itself. So I encourage people to work in a campaign, to work on the staff of a city council or a member of the Congress, to run for the school board, to get involved in the community boards here in the city of New York. There are so many ways in which you can serve. And I tell young people too, that if you're in public service, there's such gratification that you sacrifice financially. You don't earn as much as you do when you're in the private sector. But when you're lying in that bed, in the last days of your life, you want to feel good. You want to feel good about yourself, about what you did with the time that Hashem gave you to be on the earth. And if you have served, if you tried to repair and improve the world, then at least you're going to have some satisfaction and gratification that you did all you could to bring about some benefit or some improvement for the next guy.
By the way, on your devotion to bipartisanship, you have a story about a guy who showed up who was a former Marine brigadier general who was looking for a entry-level position in the Attorney General's office. And you were saying to him, you want to be entry position? Yes, sir. And do you want to? It's okay if you work in the 350 people above? Yes, sir. And then the pièce de résistance, I think, was he said, I'm a Republican. I think that, if I remember that correctly. And you said to him, come on. I mean, that's Bob Abrams. I mean, that's you. And I think story tells it has a big message, I think, to me.
Yeah, when you say, come on, we got to have the audience understand. I became Attorney General, first Democrat in 40 years to be elected Attorney General of New York, but I was committed to run that office as a meritocracy. I got elected, but I was going to run it professionally on the merits, no patronage. No one was allowed to ask anybody about their political affiliation. No one was going to be allowed, never done before in the history of the state. I sent out a notice, no one is allowed to contribute to my campaign. Your spouses can't contribute to my campaign. I don't want you to work in my campaign. You're an assistant attorney general, you do your job. I'm the politician. I'll go out and run and take care of the campaigns. You just do your job. If you do your job, you're going to do good things and build a record for the Attorney General's office and for me, and I'll run on that record. And so I tried to build the Office of Attorney General into a quality office. And one of the things we haven't talked about yet, Mark, is how exciting it was for me to be the Attorney General of New York, to expand the role. Because for the most part, it was a backwater. It wasn't as active as the Attorney General's office is today, because I, together with my colleagues, launched a new effort at affirmative work by the Attorney General, protecting the environment, protecting consumers, bringing civil rights cases, these cases that would affect large numbers of people, big systemic cases that brought money back to the wallets and pocketbooks of consumers. The Love Canal. Before I was Attorney General, no lawsuit was ever brought to compel a wrongdoer who put hazardous waste, toxic chemicals into the ground. No one was ever brought a lawsuit to compel a cleanup of that. And in Love Canal, where 40 million pounds of toxic chemicals were placed in a community where there were 2 schools and 300 homes, and caused cancer and caused epilepsy and caused all kinds of disfigurement and problems for pregnant women and children and others who lived in that neighborhood, I stepped in to bring a lawsuit, filed a $600 million lawsuit to protect the citizens, to cause a cleanup, to cause people to be relocated, homes to be rehabilitated. That whole neighborhood revived and revitalized, and that became the model for the Superfund law across the country, and became the model for 65 other lawsuits that I brought all across New York to clean up toxic waste sites where aquifers were being contaminated. Because when you put those chemicals in the ground, they don't just sit there, they move, they migrate, they contaminate water supply. So it was a very exciting, 4 terms for me to enlarge the role of Attorney General, to run that office professionally. People left jobs in private law firms at huge cuts in salary to come to work in the Attorney General's office, because they knew they would be doing important work for the people of the state of New York. And and together with my colleagues, we actually changed and expanded the role of the Attorney General. And now the Attorney General is no longer a backseat player. He or she is a frontline protector in a whole range of ways.
And I just about family, because I don't want to lose this. This is very important. You dedicate the book to your family, and obviously you have of course, a wonderful wife, Diane. And there's a little chapter, and you have to get the book, everybody, so you can read about this. And I won't go into it, but one of the funniest parts is that when you ended up getting engaged to Diane, you came to your mother and told her, and her reaction was, because you were too busy. Rabbi Clapperman kept asking you, please, call Diane, but you were busy as a politician helping the people. Okay, because that's your mindset. Busy, devoted, dedicated. Your mother heard you're getting engaged, and she said, thank God, I thought this day would never come. I think this is absolutely heartwarming. It's absolutely beautiful. And of course, you described your wedding, and it's just absolutely beautiful. Now, I wanted to ask you, want to comment on, I would like you to talk about your family a little bit, just your feeling about your family. This is where you come from, family, and what you've done, and your family. This is I think, actually, your greatest contribution in a way. What do you think?
Well, first of all, I'm the product of a wonderful family, very humble, modest. My parents on both sides, they came from Eastern Europe. They came from Russia, from Tsarist Russia, escaping the pogroms to come to the Golden Medina, to come to this land to seek freedom and opportunity. And so my grandparents gave a sense of values to my parents, and they imparted those values to me. And that's why I guess I'm a progressive and a liberal, because my grandfather saw sweatshops and how people were abused and taken advantage of. And my father told me about that. And my father taught me about respecting all people. Didn't matter what their ethnic background was. It didn't matter their skin color or pigmentation. You know, my father was and mother, they were real champions of justice. And, you know, so I was very lucky. And Rabbi Klapperman, I was active in the Soviet Jewry movement. I was the chairman of the Greater New York Conference on Soviet Jewry, and Rabbi Klapperman, Gilbert Klapperman of the Five Towns of Beth Shalom and in Lawrence and the Five Towns. He'd see me at a rally and he'd say, "Oh, I have this girl. I know her. She's got the same values as you. She's a girl. You got to call her." And I never call her, you know. And my secretary one day, Peggy Rodriguez, I called her. She was an Irish woman with a Hispanic name, and I called her my Jewish mother. She walked in, she opened the door in my office. She said, "Mr. President, that rabbi is on the phone. Take his call and do me a favor. Do yourself a favor. Take her out. It's just an hour."
That's right.
Because I'd see him at rallies. He said, "Did you ever call that girl?" I said, "No, I don't have the time. I'm busy. I was 36 before I got married." And sure enough, it turned out to be, he was right. And it's been 46 years of great marriage and 2 wonderful daughters and 2 great sons-in-law and 8 fantastic grandchildren. And so, you know, that's at the core. I say at the dedication of the book, public service was important to me, but at my core, my is the whole essence of family, and you know, that's who drives me forward every day of my life.
And the title of the book, what an interesting title, The Luckiest Guy in the World. Very clever, but it means something to you, right?
It does. I'm lucky for what I just said because of my family. I'm lucky because the people have given me a very exciting life. They've given me an opportunity to serve in 3 different offices, each different: a member of the state legislature in the assembly, a borough president of the Bronx, attorney general of the state of New York. They've given me the opportunity to tour this country and work with other attorneys general. That gave me the opportunity to go around the world as an emissary of the United States after the fall of the Berlin Wall. Attorneys, 3 or 4 other attorneys general and I, we went to Poland and Czechoslovakia and Hungary and talked about building democratic institutions. The U.S. Information Agency sent us to the Soviet Union. I took that delegation of 10 attorneys general and I converted them into advocates on behalf of Soviet Jewry. Every meeting we had, I made sure, not I, because I was the Jewish attorney general, all the others were not Jewish. They were the ones who raised the issue of Soviet Jewry. And they took out the lists of refuseniks and they wanted to become back Zionists as a result of what they have seen and the kind of interactions that they've had with people. So, you know, I'm concerned about the Democratic Party living up to its tradition of being strong supporters of Israel. I'll tell you something that most people don't know. In 1972, I told George McGovern that the Democratic Party should have in its platform that Jerusalem should be and deserves to be and must be the capital of the state of Israel. And that was the first time that that concept was ever in a party platform of any party in this country. And it was a key part of the essence of the Democratic Party and the Republican Party as well thereafter. So I'm concerned about any kind of drift that is taking place. And, you know, I'm going to have breakfast in a few days with somebody I'm very impressed with, Richie Torres. He's the new congressman from the South Bronx.
Right.
He's Puerto Rican. He's gay. One of his parents was Black. The other parent was Hispanic. And he is the most articulate, passionate supporter of Israel, saying, what is this nonsense? You mean you can't be a liberal and support Israel? Israel is the bastion of democracy in the Middle East, you know. So, yeah, there's lots to do. Before I talked about rolling up your sleeves and getting involved, lots to do within the Democratic Party, the Republican Party. We got a big agenda, and a lot of things on that agenda are incredibly important.
Effie, let's show the picture of Bob with Golda Meir, because I think you've met you list how many prime ministers you've met of Israel, but there's some beautiful pictures with Senator Moynihan and Golda.
And that's Anatoly Sharansky, Natan Sharansky.
And Natan Sharansky, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's another one. Isn't there another picture also with Golda? Yeah, this one. Wow, what a beautiful picture.
A young borough president meeting Golda Meir. We don't have time now, but I can tell you wonderful stories of what happened in that session with Golda Meir. Fabulous woman. Again, Israel being a pioneer, one of the first countries ever to have the leader of the government, the leader of the country, be a woman. And she was fantastic.
Well, I think I'm looking at the clock, and we actually, I think, are at the end of our program. Oh, yes. Why don't you describe this photo about the Panovs?
I was very active in Soviet Jewry. I was involved in all the major cases, the Silva Salmonson case and the Levitch case, and these were. And when I was in the Soviet Union, I raised those issues. And one time, they said, "Oh, people can go. The only people who don't go, we don't release, are security threats to the Soviet Union." I said, "Security threats? Well, what about Valerie and Galina Panov, their ballet dancers in the Kirov Ballet?" And they said, make a long story short, as a result of that meeting, they told me that they would be able to leave. And this is a picture of the Panovs coming. They made Aliyah to Israel, and they were coming from Israel to JFK, and there's a bouquet of roses there. And it was a very exciting moment.
Well, we're going to conclude at this time, and I think you have a lot of very nice. By the way, please everybody get the book. Amazon has a link. It's a great book. It's very funny. I mean, I think it's just charming. I enjoyed it very much, and learning all kinds of things about Bob Abrams, who has been there. And there's a book called Present at the Creation by Dean Atchison, but that's Bob Abrams has been present at the creation of all of the very important issues that we take for granted today. I just would like to read Father Giganti's review of the book, a little bit of it, because it shows you how people feel about Bob. And he says, "Your hard work, commitment, and fight for justice made a difference and brought about change and renewal. Bravo, excellent and inspiring, a must read." And on that thought, I want to thank the Honorable Robert Abrams and the entire Abrams family for allowing us to have this time with Bob Abrams, who has given a real blessing to us by writing this book. And I suggested the next book you can write about maybe is your leadership recommendations and your skills and the people that you worked with, because you've worked with everyone. I think we would benefit tremendously from learning from your model of how you did what you did. And that would be a great privilege for all of us. So, Bob, any final thoughts before we adjourn the court?
Well, it took me 4 years to do this book, and the editor made me cut out 100,000 words. They said, "Your book is too long. You love my stories," but the editor thought there were too many of those stories. So it'll be a while before I can catch my breath and start on another one. But I'm glad I did it, and I'm honored that you have enabled me to come and do this Zoom session, and that KJ people can share some thoughts with me over the course of this past hour.
Well, thank you very much. And to everyone, have a wonderful evening, and go on Amazon immediately, get the book, read it. And we guarantee you'll have a lot of laughs, and you'll also learn some heartwarming things about someone that we know and admire. That's Bob Abrams. So have a wonderful evening. Best of luck to you, your family, for only mazel and success and brachas, and all good things. And may you continue to do the wonderful things that you've done throughout your magnificent career. Good night, everybody. And we'll see everybody hopefully soon in shul together. Okay. Good night, everybody. And thank you very much, Bob, for the wonderful program.
Please, thanks. Thank you, Mark. Thanks a lot.